It's time to review Zootopia 2. Let's get into it. Before we go too far into the movie review, my name is Casey. I've been a husband, father, and a conservative man for more than a decade, and I am a counselor who is vastly concerned with the type of messaging that Hollywood is trying to send to our kids, and that's why I try to review the new movies that come out. If you can get behind a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom in America, please like on the way in. I would love to earn your subscription. Let's look at Zootopia 2, what they said, what they didn't, and if this movie is too volatile to show your kids. Let me say right off the bat that Zootopia 2 isn't exactly a disaster, but it is a typical Hollywood sequel, less charming than the first, less original than the first, and my kids were entertained during the process of watching it, but my wife and I had conversations afterwards about some of the sliding messaging and some of the overt adult things that were in this movie. Let's get into exactly what that looks like, but I'll give the rating at the end of the review to let you know from a Christian conservative perspective, is this movie showable at your home? One of the accidentally honest parts of this movie is that the different types of animals live behind walls, and that allows them to live in relative harmony with one another because their environments are different and because they have different needs. And so this is sort of the antithesis of what Hollywood usually tells us, that diversity is our strength. And of course, they're trying to bring forth the John Lennon's Imagine song in animal form, and it's barely hidden, but they kind of do an accidental disservice or injustice to their messaging by saying that these walls and boundaries can be healthy. They have separated these animals in ways that have allowed all of them to thrive and survive within one city. Civilization doesn't happen because everyone pretends differences don't exist. It happens because differences are managed wisely. Unfortunately, the film later walks this back, pushing the idea that differences should ultimately be overlooked and respected, moving us from order to just trust the process, diversity is our strength, and all those. There's a repeated theme that some of the heritage of the animals in the movie were giving messages to the later generations that said that they wanted all species to live together, and they're reframing the modern diversity ideology as ancient wisdom rather than a contemporary political project. This is a familiar Hollywood move, of course, and if we say it's tradition, you won't notice it's activism. That's exactly what this movie is attempting to do. It's reframing this ancient and ancestral idea as being diversity is our strength, everyone should live together, whereas that is a very new and ultimately liberal project. This film also leans heavily into anti-capitalist rhetoric. They put the Lynx family, the ones who are in control of all the land and a lot of the practices of the politicians, including the mayor in this case and the police department in some cases, they are framing them as land grabbing, exploitative, detached from the ordinary animals and responsible for the suffering of those below them. It's a familiar script that you're going to see in a great many Hollywood movies. Rich is predatory and poor is virtuous. At the same time, they sort of frame the reptiles that are being cast out of the society as being a lot like the Southern slaves before the Civil War. They live in a bayou. They are being manipulated by elites, but they're secretly holding society together. This metaphor is not subtle. It isn't nuanced. It's clearly modern politics wearing animal costumes. In the original film, the Zootopia Police Department is framed as a generally positive force, one that, of course, Hops wanted to join from the early parts of her life, and it was a place of growth and accountability, and one where they even received plaudits when they did well at the end of the first movie. However, now it's framed as being patriarchal, and the patriarchy is incompetent and unfair to Hops. Male authority figures are, of course, unwitting and doofuses, and they're out of touch, emotionally stunted, and they're obstacles rather than protectors, which leads exactly into the ways that the therapy culture is portrayed all throughout this movie, which is an especially agitating thing for me as a therapist. I really dislike our therapy culture and how it's proliferated into all kids' movies now. In this movie, there is constant therapy language being given between Hobbs and Wilde, which are the two stars of the movie. They must absolutely process everything, and when they don't, it's seen as being a weakness, usually on the part of Wilde, which is the fox and the male in this case. They accuse each other at times of oversharing, which is obviously, just gushing all of their emotions and word vomiting all of this therapy language all over the screen. And they frame conflict through emotional validation rather than responsibility. The climax of the film is not sacrifice, it's not action, it is a therapy session sequence between the two stars of the film, which is particularly disconcerting because I don't want my kids necessarily to just be inculcated with all of this therapy language all the time and making the case that if you don't share, which is obviously anti-masculine, the oversharing, the processing of emotions verbally, if you don't do that, then you're weak and somehow you needed to accomplish that in order to be the hero in your own story. If you're not talking about your feelings constantly in this movie, you're broken. Now, emotional honesty is good, but turning therapy into the highest virtue, especially for men, is a very specific and new worldview that I do not approve of. The worst part of the movie, in my opinion, was the adult Easter eggs that they tried to throw in, which oftentimes came with overly spicy language that was obviously unnecessary in the film. It says in one part that you suck. It says that you have to have a 3-something to be something, the 4-way to get through the doorway, things like this. What the pork, and I'll have what she's having, which is a reference to Meg Ryan in that one movie where she, wink, wink, has a big O in the middle of a cafeteria or whatever. These are clearly meant to be wink wink jokes for adults, but the point is it didn't need to be there at all, and that was an unfortunate addition. I'll hard pass on this kind of language in a kids movie. There was one drastically positive part of the movie, and one of the major themes is that the fox, Wilde, and Nick Wilde ends up learning that there are things worth dying for, and that was ultimately for him to sacrifice himself in order to save his friend Hobbs. So in this case, sacrifice, loyalty, and standing for something beyond comfort is brought to the foreground, and that is something that I do want my children to learn. That is more the positive aspects of masculinity that they did choose to bring forth. This theme is deeply compatible with the Christian worldview, and I wish the movie had leaned into it more fervently. So if you are a Christian conservative, should you put Zootopia 2 on in your house? Or if you are just one of those things, should this be viewing potentially in your home? I would say it gets a 5 out of 10 in terms of messaging, in terms of ideological messages, in terms of the adult themes that are in it, and it's less entertaining than the original. It's more political, it's heavier on modern ideologies, and it's still visually creative and engaging for kids. My kids still enjoyed it, but for my wife and I wouldn't ban it blindly, but I would maybe be prepared to pause the movie and tell them a little bit about what we actually believe and why Disney is not necessarily teaching your kids what you want them to know. If you would like further movie reviews, please like this video. I would love to continue to give some reviews of what content parents should look out for coming into their homes and which ones are a complete check mark from a Christian conservative worldview. Please like and share, subscribe. I appreciate your support.